thank you again, both of you, for taking time to do this. And I think we'll go ahead and get started. So I'll start with introductions. We'll move right into questions. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Valeria, and I am the Advocacy Director of A+ Colorado. We've teamed up with DEFR to highlight some community partners for their work. With me is Juliet from DEFR and Danielle and Ivana from STAND, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
Sure. I'm Danielle. I'm the organizing director at Stand for Children. And yeah, I've been on the team about 2 years and lead our team of organizers.
My name's Ivana. I'm the Southwest organizer for STAND. I've been at STAND for about 2.5 years.
So I'm Juliet, as I was already mentioning, I'm the District Program Associate for DEFR, which is Democrats for Education Reform. And we're so excited to have you today from STAND. The purpose of this is just to highlight some of the work that you're doing. And so we're fascinated. So we'll get right into questioning. So how has the work of your organization shifted during the current crisis of COVID-19? And what aspect of it has remained the same?
So I would say that not to downplay the crisis or necessarily say that it is not a big deal, but we think about organizing as having to be adaptive to change all the time. And we think about our work as always having to be grounded in what parents need and what students need. And so for us, that piece has not changed. And we have had to think about how we prioritize what students and families need in a moment of crisis. But we know that educational inequity existed before this. Those inequities exist now. And if anything, are only being exacerbated by this crisis. So we see it as our role to really listen to families and hear what it is that they need, and then do everything in our power to connect them to those resources and find spaces for them to raise their voices to power and push for a more equitable system in the midst of a crisis.
I also would want to add to that, like the most real way that the job has both changed and stayed the same for me is that my job consists of building relationships with people on the ground and making sure that we're serving parents and that parents feel supported. And the way that has shifted is that now, instead of building relationships in person, I'm always on the phone and making phone calls, and that has changed from in-person to virtual communication.
Totally. And I think that for us, we know that there are folks who provide direct service to families and have been doing that work for years and years. And it is not our place to step in and try to sort of lean on that work, but rather we want to lift up those folks who are providing those direct services that our parents need, and really focus for us on advocacy and how we continue to create and find spaces for parents to advocate for what they need in this moment. So right now that is looking, after doing sort of 3 weeks of phone calls and surveys and talking to our families, we heard a lot about the access issues that folks were facing, both access to technology and then access to the internet. And so we have partnered up with an organization called Education Superhighway to do an advocacy campaign asking Congress to expand the E-rates program, which essentially expands internet access for folks across the country. And so we'll be working on that over the course of the next couple of weeks to try to get that money allocated, to states in order to connect families to the internet so that they can continue the process of learning during this time. And so we're doing that sort of work where, you know, we had lots of campaigns lined up, right? We had stuff around expanding access to pre-K, and we were all in on the DPS next generation strategic plan. And we've sort of put that stuff on pause because as I mentioned before, I think that listening is really the most important piece and in organizing and advocacy. And what we heard was those aren't the challenges, those aren't the most important things. We actually really need help with connecting to our teachers and our schools in this problem, or in this time, particularly around access to the internet.
Thank you for that. Aside from access to the internet, have you heard of any other challenges or needs that families are facing during this time, since I know you all have been communicating with them on a daily basis?
As Danielle shared a little bit at the beginning, we started doing phone calls basically since the state of emergency started to happen. And the things we started to hear were families were really worried about economic stability in households. Either both parents have lost jobs or one parent has lost their job. And even if none of them have, there's also the fact that they can't stay home. They're essential workers, so they're worried about their health as well. Parents definitely have felt nervous. They don't feel like they're equipped to be teachers for their kids at home, and now they're required to do that for the foreseeable future. So that's another big one we've definitely heard. There's also a language barrier between what kids are learning at school and what some parents are able to do at home. Like if a parent only speaks Spanish and all classes are in English, there's not much the parent will be able to do there. And as Danielle had said before, there's also the lack of access to internet, and that's one that keeps coming up now. And I would say the last one, big one that I've heard, is the fact that the undocumented community can't access a lot of federal aid. So there's a lot of uncertainty when it comes to the undocumented community. How will they be able to survive?
Yep. I would echo two pieces that Ivana shared in particular. I think there's a lot of like just nervousness and anxiety around parents having to step into that role of teacher, and a lot of paired with that appreciation for the hard work that teachers are doing to try to connect with every single family, and that principals are doing and that district leaders are doing to try to connect. And we know principals that are hand delivering computers, just trying to get every single family what they need. And so I think that we've heard from our parents just a lot of appreciation for that, and still this like sense of nervousness of what is going to happen to my child's education? Am I going to be adequate to meet this challenge? And then the second piece that I would just double down on is, we know that economic security, access to food, ability to pay the rent, like those things are very real for the families that we serve. And so we're really excited to be able to partner with this setup called Project 100 that is going to be giving $100 million to 100,000 families in 100 days. And so we're going to be able to get our families a pretty sizable direct payment to anyone that has taken action with us over the course of the year. And I think that we believe always that we need to connect folks to resources, and right now the most important resource for many of our families is just those dollars to be able to be financially steady for the time being. We always talk about sort of Maslow's hierarchy before Bloom's taxonomy, and so we're just feeling really grateful for the partners that we have that are able to connect our parents to those resources, and just are excited to be a part of that project, because we do, like, as Ivana said, all the stuff that we heard is first and foremost, like, I'm worried about providing for my family. And then if I think specifically about education, I'm worried about making sure my kid gets the learning done that they need to do during this time.
Thank you both. And I think you guys are in such a unique space as an organization, and you take up a unique space within the ecosystem of education as being like a policy organization, but also a community facing organization. And I think it's fascinating the work that you guys have been doing to kind of decipher the needs when it comes to, I really love your survey that you did early on with families to kind of figure out what their immediate needs are. And then as we go into online learning, how are families handling like the closure of school and all of a sudden switch into online learning? Like, how are they handling it, and how have you been able to come alongside them?
I think so. As I said before, a lot of what we started to hear was like at the beginning, families were just worried about the access of education. They wanted their kids, they were worried about what was going to happen for the rest of the year. How were their kids going to continue learning and not fall behind? Once the virtual learning became a reality and a possibility, parents just started being grateful that that was a possibility, but also I would say scared and nervous about having to step into that role. And then we started seeing a lot more challenges when it came to being able to connect families with the learning. One of the big ones was access to computers or devices, and thank God DPS was able to do an amazing job with actually providing families with computers if they needed it, and schools really stepped up and did amazing. And now we're seeing just the lack of internet access that has already existed within our district is now more obvious than ever, because a lot of our families don't have access to internet, therefore don't have access to that virtual learning opportunity. And that's just like, I think where we're at now with what we're hearing now and what we're trying to solve for now.
Totally. And what we're doing now is we're pivoting a little bit from, we had done a broader needs assessment for the first 3 weeks, and we've just launched another assessment that is specific to virtual learning. So we'll continue to share out what we're learning, because we had, I believe we're up to 92 families as of this morning in the last like 12 hours take that survey. And so what we're hearing, as Ivana said, is like, folks are eager to try to log in and log on and figure it out. It's a bumpy road, but the biggest gaps are in the communities that already gaps existed in. And so we have to be really aware about how this crisis is sort of exacerbating the inequities that already existed in our community, and how we can use this as an opportunity to drive dollars and resources directly to those communities, and let those folks lead the conversation about how those resources get spent. I just think that we have an opportunity and a responsibility as a equity-focused organization to ensure that it's not just we need to solve this crisis, but we actually need to prioritize closing equity gaps where we can in the midst of trying to solve the crisis. And so, as we talked about, the E-rates program that we are trying to advocate for at the federal level continues to be one piece of this puzzle. The other piece that we think is really important, and as Juliet mentioned, we sort of live in this interesting both community organizing space and policy space. We're really leaning in with the Colorado Department of Education to make sure that schools and districts are taking note of who is participating and who isn't participating in the online learning now, because we know that principals and schools and teachers are doing everything that they can to connect with those kids, but we also know that some kids are connecting and some kids are not, and we know that that gap is gonna has the potential to further already existing opportunity gaps for our kids of color, our low-income kids. And so we need to make sure that we are noticing where those gaps are widening, and then use that information to be able to funnel dollars to places that have those big gaps, because we know that districts did not put in their budgets a process to track and follow students and find students in this moment of crisis. That was not ever part of the plan, but we know that some districts will have more work to do to connect to those students than others, and we want to make sure that from the state level, we actually funnel resources to places where that gap is showing up. So those are a couple pieces that come to mind. Just a couple.
No, it's okay. Thank you for sharing all that information with us. I think people will be very interested in listening to all that and listening to all the support that you all are offering your families right now. Is there anyone on your team, or maybe a parent or a family that you're supporting, that you would like to highlight during this time or give a little shout out?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, all of our parent volunteers just continue to blow us away. We have continued to provide them like high level information about decisions being made at the state and then the district level, because we sort of, as part of our ethos, think that they should continue to have the agency to opt in or opt out of advocacy, and that it's not our place to guess whether or not they're ready to engage. And they are just so ready. Like, I think that this moment of crisis has unveiled inequities that we knew existed, but like brought them to the forefront in a way that has been really motivating and agitating for our families. And they are just so ready to think creatively about what the next phase of this education looks like, and to be an active participant in designing what that chapter looks like.
Yeah, and also, I definitely want to give a few shout outs to some of our parent leaders and our school partners. But the fact that we've seen how parents like Natalie Perez, who she called her entire team of parents that she has managed, and she made sure they were okay. And then she sent me this detailed email with what everyone said and how everyone needs help. And she even had like next steps. That was really amazing. Another mom, Ruby, she is currently in Mexico. She was there on vacation and has not been able to come back. But even from Mexico, she's still following what the district is doing with the SPF reimagining process and really showing up. And then Nayeli, who, despite the fact that she is monolingual Spanish, she has really stepped up being able to provide for her kids and asking for help when she needs the help, and also showing up for our Zoom calls that we're doing every week, where we're just connecting everyone and making everyone feel good and fuzzy inside. And there's also a story about a principal. His name is Jesse. He's the principal of Schmidt Elementary. And I was trying to reach him last week, and he sent me this text being like, I am trying to deliver computers right now to families that don't have it, but I'll call you as soon as I can. And that to me was just beautiful, how it really takes a village for kids to be able to get quality education. And we see it now more than ever, how teachers and principals are stepping in to provide resources for families and students. And it's really beautiful.
Yeah, and I would also just say I'm really proud of Stan's team of organizers. I feel like they always are doing work to build deep relationships in the communities that they organize, and they've been really able to lean in and activate those networks to connect to resources really quickly, but also to be able to hear without, having to establish new pathways of trust, just like what the real challenges are facing the families that we serve, so that we can quickly mobilize those resources, advocate for the policy changes that they need. And they've really just like pushed hard to be in touch with every single family that we have connections to. And I think that shout out goes especially to Valerie Bustamante. She's our newest organizer, and she had about a week and a half on the job with us in person in the office before we sort of went into this COVID crisis. And she's just really leaned into the role and to connecting with families, even though she's just brand new with us. And just like two quick highlights, she was calling through her list of parents, and she had spoke with a mom who was in the middle of moving to Utah in the midst of this crisis. Like, we didn't plan for it. And so then she spent a couple of days trying to put that parent in touch with the school district in Utah and make sure that that family and that child had access to learning in Utah, despite sort of the transition that was happening. And, I think it's that like high level and attention to detail, follow through, that just makes like the work of organizers so powerful, because the impact that they have is just for that child to now be connected in a city, in a community where they were not connected, is just will change that child's at least school year, but probably put them on a different footstep than they would have otherwise been in that district. And I think just even things like she was chatting with a principal and trying to get a charger for a device for a mom that had the computer but didn't get the charger. And it's just those little things, those little kinks in the system that are have the potential to take down all the work that we're doing. And so having organizers that are so committed to making sure every single step of the process is working for families has been really inspiring for me in this crazy town crisis.
That's amazing. Shout out to your organizers and your parents, because that all sounds like really, really great work. I used to be an organizer, so I know how important it is. A little biased there. And then speaking more about like how you all are supporting families, is there anything else that you would like to share about other ways that you've supported the community that you serve?
Yeah, I think that we've already mentioned a few. We've mentioned the fact that we called our members and our supporters with a survey, making sure they were okay and connecting them with the resources of the things they were unsure about or needed help with. We also have mentioned how we have given some economic assistance to our volunteers and our parent leaders. I'll also say we've been hosting Zoom calls every week, both in Spanish and in English, because we have not been able to figure out Zoom interpretation. It is a thing we're still working on. So we host different calls and they're just to provide resources. They're to provide connection in a time where a lot of families are used to having their friends around and they're really craving that connection with other people. We started them to share resources, but last week was my favorite one. We did yoga both with English speakers and Spanish speakers, and it was really nice being able to do something that was just for a collective mental health break. And we were in the middle of the Spanish call and one of the moms had to get up and serve dinner for the family and she left the daughter, and it was like this 7-year-old girl trying to figure out how to do like downward dog, and it was just really beautiful, and it's a way that we've been connecting, so it's been really great.
And I would add one of the things that popped out on our on our assessment survey was folks wanted access to supporting literacy at home. We have long done literacy workshops for families in schools. And so what we were able to do is to take all of those resources from those workshops and put them online. And then this week's hangout, as we call our Zoom call, will actually be walking families through those online literacy resources. So I think it's also a constant like feedback loop of what are families saying, how can we do that? Okay, they're saying that they need like connection and like mental health support. Okay, let's do some yoga. Okay, now they're saying they're ready to like need help with online learning. How can we lean in there? And so we're really trying to, in real time, respond to what our families need. If there are, I know our next question is about support from partners, but if there are resources that partners have that that would be useful for families during this time, I think we can continue to push those sorts of things out in the hangouts and in our emails and all the sort of touch points we have with families.
Thank you both so much for all the hard work that you've done. It seems like you mentioned, Danielle, you guys have found a really nice balance of not only listening, but doing the action as well that comes after you've listened. So as you mentioned, other than resources and kind of giving you guys as partners, what are some things or other ways that organizations can support your organization moving on? And how can we best come alongside you as you serve families?
I really appreciate the question because I think that's the spirit in which this community has responded to this crisis. Everybody has stepped up to say, how can I serve? From partners to donors to policymakers, folks have really leaned in and said, what do families need? And I think that like shout out from all the way from the governor to DPS officials, like getting folks what they need, the food delivery systems, the technology and the internet has all just been really astounding to watch a community really stand up and try to support its families during this crazy time. I would say, perhaps this is my bias as an organizer, but my call for partners and other community organizations would be to continue to listen to families, that we should put students and parents at the center of the conversations that we're having, of the actions we're taking, and not just sort of in spirit, but actually listening to real life families about what they need and then responding to that. I think sometimes when we get urgent and feel like we need to take an action, we skip that step because we're like, oh, this will probably be what folks need. And I think that my call would just be to continue to listen and then drive your actions from there, and hold us accountable to that too. I think that it's a temptation that we can all fall into, but we really want our parents to be at the center of this conversation, and that their needs and their voices really driving where we go from here. So yeah, that would be my ask of our friends.
And I think I'd like to add to that, just that as much as we're listening to our families, to also keep our families informed and listen to any decisions that are being taken by either the district or the state, and passing that information along. I think during times like these, it's easy to think that someone cannot either handle some information or that they won't want to take action because they're dealing with so many things. But at the end of the day, really giving the power away and giving them the choice of either doing something and like sending a letter to their senator or being involved in some sort of campaign, or if they're like, you know, I'm super overwhelmed right now, then listening to that and being like, no worries, I'll continue to let you know what's going on and you can take action whenever you want. So I think having that balance is also something that our community will have the challenge to figure out in the next couple of months. So all of us as partners.
Thank you. Thank you both very much. And I just wanted to highlight, first give you both thanks for coming on and chatting with us, but just to let folks know that they can go on your website, which is stand.org, to get all the resources that you've talked about, but also to find ways to connect with you and also support some of the amazing work that you're doing. So thank you both from the team at DEFR and the team at A+. We really appreciate having partners like you in this space, and kudos to you for all the work that you're doing, and let us know if there's any way we can help. So once again, it's stand.org, and families and community partners, as well as other partners, can go on there to support your work, but also to see some of the amazing work that you're doing.
Yes, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.